Salmon vanilla. Salmon vanilla definitely does not sound right. Okay, it says here salmonella. My bad. Alright, all gross food jokes aside, today I'm going to be talking to you about a little bacteria called Salmonella Enterica. So first a little bit about it. Salmonella Enterica, or just Salmonella, is a gram-negative bacillus bacteria. It also has flagella and is a facultative anaerobe. A facultative anaerobe is a type of bacteria that lives in the presence of oxygen, but if need be, it can survive without it. And flagella is like that little doobly-doo that can kind of be like this, or sometimes this. So now that we know just a little bit of background about this bacterium, let's learn a little bit about what it can do to you and I. When one is infected with salmonella, it is then considered a condition called salmonellosis. Now salmonellosis is not fun. It leads to a lot of crappy things. No pun intended. One of the main things is gastroenteritis, which is basically like the stomach flu. This is when you have severe diarrhea and vomiting accompanied by a high fever. This is pretty dangerous, considering that with all that loss of fluids, you can get very dehydrated. If you're suffering from long-term salmonellosis, you can actually also develop arthritis. This is due to the bacteria moving into your bloodstream and eventually into your joints. Now this can clear up thankfully, but it can lead into chronic arthritis throughout your life. Back to the crappy stuff for a second. So usually healthy adults can overcome this infection in 4 to 7 days. But there may be lingering effects to your bowels for a couple months. This basically just means that your bowels have to get used to not being voided all the time. Now back to that reactive arthritis. It can last anywhere from a couple months to a year, and treatment with early antibiotics doesn't really affect whether you get that or not. It's kind of just like the luck of the draw. Now that we know a little bit about the infection that this bacteria causes, let's learn a little bit about the virulence factors that cause these conditions, and make our good friend salmon vanilla a pathogenic bacteria. Now there's a few virulence factors that salmonella has that we can get out of the way before we get into the nitty-gritty of what it does. Those being that it's gram-negative, which means that it has a larger cell wall with LPS in it. If you remember, LPS is lipopolysaccharide, which is an endotoxin. It also has flagella, which allows it to be more motile inside your body. Now let's get into the virulence factors that make you have stomach flu-like symptoms and also cause a fever. The main thing that pathogens want to do is hide from your immune system and also kill your own cells. Salmonella does this in some really clever ways. Once the bacteria makes it past your stomach and into your intestine, it starts its pathogenesis. Inside the intestines, there's lots of epithelial tissue with mini organelles called microvilli. Microvilli increase surface area to allow our intestines to absorb nutrients effectively. On the bacteria are special adhesin proteins which allow the bacteria to adhere to the epithelial cell. Once on the epithelial cell, it releases toxins through a type 3 secretion system. These toxins cause changes in the epithelial cell membrane to engulf the bacteria into itself. Once inside the epithelial cells, salmonella releases more proteins that create a barrier around the vesicle that they're encompassed in. These proteins allow them to be protected and hidden from our immune system. And since they're hidden, they're not free to reproduce. Inside our intestines, there's also specialized epithelial cells called M cells. These M cells are connected directly to our immune system and initiate immune responses. So, since salmonella is inside of our regular epithelial cells and these specialized M cells, it can cause great havoc throughout our body. Inside the regular epithelial cells, it causes a severe inflammatory response, which causes the regular gastroenteritis symptoms that you get. And inside the M cells, it gives itself access to macrophages and neutrophils. Once inside macrophages, they can be transported throughout our whole body and into our blood. And usually when they're inside of neutrophils, they go to your liver. Once inside our bloodstream, salmonella can infect different parts of the body. The main ones I'll mention are your spleen and bones. Inside the spleen, it initiates a severe immune response, which causes such a high fever. And once inside the bones, it can cause you to have arthritic symptoms. Also, there's a subtype of salmonella called Salmonella Enterica typhi, which can cause you to have typhoidal fever. Typhoid is a rare condition that causes you to have severe fever, headache, dehydration, diarrhea or constipation, and abdominal pain, like regular salmonella. Luckily, nowadays, this is sort of rare and also can be kind of prevented with a vaccine. Since salmonella's main effect is inside your intestinal system, That is where you get this severe dehydration and diarrhea, constipation, and abdominal pain. And since it causes such a severe immune response, that's where you get all of your fevers, cramps, aches, and stuff like that. Luckily, if you're a healthy individual and you get plenty of rest and drink lots of water, you should get better in no time. Now that we know a little bit about the signs and symptoms and the different virulence factors that give you those symptoms, let's learn a little bit about the diagnostic tools that help us identify if you have Salmonella or not. Health professionals use a couple tests to see if there's Salmonella present in your body. They usually collect a sample from your blood or stool. This sample is then tested to see if it's positive for Salmonella. Once it's found to be positive for Salmonella, they then do specific testing called serotyping. A serotype is just a group of bacteria that share similar characteristics on their outside. The main things they test for is antigen O and antigen H. Antigen O, as we learned in class, is found in LPS, or lipopolysaccharide, and antigen H is found in the flagella of the Salmonella. After the specific serotype is found, they could then pinpoint where you got the infection from. This is because different serotypes are found in different places, such as different animals or different water sources. This is because that certain type of Salmonella is specialized to live in those certain areas. Furthermore, scientists then do gel electrophoresis to get a good genetic idea of the Salmonella inside you. This is so they can catalog it for breakout patterns. Now that we know how you can figure out if you are infected with Salmonella, let's figure out which kind of populations are more at risk for getting it. Instances of Salmonella are actually quite common. In the US, there's about 1.2 million cases each year. About 23,000 of those cases end up in the patient being hospitalized, and about 450 of those patients actually die. You're more at risk if you're under the age of 5 or over the age of 65. This is due to your immune system not being fully developed or being weakened with age. The largest at-risk group is children under 5. In this population, about every 65 out of 100,000 people get infected with it. Now this rate drops down to about 20 in 100,000 for the rest of the age groups, but jumps back up to about 30 in people over 65. It's interesting to note, however, that 1.1 out of the 1.2 million cases each year is acquired in America. It's also important to note, however, that those that are immunocompromised are also at a higher risk for this infection. Luckily, if you do end up contracting Salmonella, there's only about a 0.04% that you'll actually die from it. I mean, those are kind of good odds, I guess, but you do have to keep in mind that you can die from this infection. That's why it's important to treat it quickly and effectively. Now we're going to explore different places that Salmonella is harbored and how its transmission from those places to us. Salmonellosis is a zoonotic condition, which means that it's transferred from animals to humans. Salmonella calls many different animals its home, but the ones that I'm going to talk about are poultry, beef, and reptiles. For example, let's say you're cooking beef or chicken and you happen to not wash your hands or wash a cutting board or wash a knife properly. You then cook the meat, killing all the bacteria, but the bacteria still remains on your cutting board, hands, or knife. You then go slice up some onions or something and then get the bacteria onto that. Or let's say you prepare a salad and you don't wash your hands properly. These are different ways that the bacteria can be transferred from uncooked raw meats into your cooked, prepared foods. Let's also say that you're handling a reptile, like my pet here, Hibby. If I were to hang out with her and then not wash my hands after doing so, I could possibly get Salmonella from her onto me. This is because reptiles like snakes or turtles can have Salmonella in their digestive system. It's then transferred from their fecal material into their enclosure. Then she could slither around inside her own feces and contaminate her skin. Now, with proper hand washing and proper utensil cleaning while cooking, you can prevent a lot of Salmonella breakouts. Also, with proper cleaning of your pet's enclosure, you can ensure that they will not be infected with Salmonella. It's also really important to ensure that you cook your meat thoroughly and get it to the proper temperature in order to kill all the bacteria inside of it. I also make sure that I clean Hibby's cage as soon as I see any droppings inside of it. With all this preemptive care, you can ensure that you, your friends, and family don't happen to get Salmonella. You don't have Salmonella now, do you, Hibby? But once I put her back into her cage, I'm going to make sure I wash my hands appropriately. Say goodbye. Now let's say I have Salmonella. Wait, I have Salmonella? What do I do? Whoever is infected with Salmonella should consider lots of bed rest and lots of rehydration. Now let's say you're under the age of 5 or over the age of 65, or you have some sort of immunodeficiency. In all of these circumstances, including if your symptoms don't get better within 5 to 7 days, you should consider going to see your primary care physician. If you happen to have a gastroenterologist, I would recommend going to them as well. In these situations, whether you go to a doctor, specialist, or go to the hospital, you may get some sort of IV rehydration therapy in order to put back some of the fluids that you've lost. In severe cases, and those that have typhoidal salmonella, you may be prescribed antibiotics. Usually though, antibiotics are not prescribed to patients with salmonellosis because it can prolong the effects of the infection. Now for those that are at risk of typhoidal salmonella, there is a vaccine and a booster that you can get every 2 years that can help boost your immunity against it. But for those that are not high at risk, there is no real vaccine for salmonella. Now we've learned a lot about our friend Salmonella. A little rod-shaped gram-negative bacteria discovered by a scientist nearly over 125 years ago is still very prevalent nowadays. We've learned about some of the signs and symptoms and virulence factors that cause those symptoms, some of the diagnostic tools to figure out if you have salmonella, and different treatment options you can have to either prevent or help you get over the infection, who's at risk for getting salmonella, and the different rates that you could have for either being hospitalized, contracting it, or dying from it. And we've also learned where you can get salmonella from and how to prevent getting it from there to you. Now, armed with all that information, I hope you wash your hands, cook your food, and clean your pets' cages correctly. And doing those simple little steps can prevent you from getting a very unsettling infection. An infection of a fish and a sweetener? And that about wraps it up. Bye.